Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode number 96. And the title of this episode is We've Turned the Corner and Are Headed Toward the Economic Collapse. And as you can see, the Fed, the Plunge Protection Team, the high-frequency traders tried all day to pump the stock market up the best they can, but they just fell short of 15,000 points. But we'll see by next week they will continually pump it up and get it back over 15,000 because all eyes on the stock market before they let this baby go. And they don't want anyone to realize that the economy around them is falling apart. So if you're just looking at the stock market, and every day people do, and they say, oh, look, the stock market's up, everything must be okay. And that's what they look at. Yesterday and the day before, we had gold, and it was slammed down, and it went below $1,200 an ounce. Today it's back up. It's like over $1,200 now, and we're seeing things in the economy. We are seeing things happening all around, and basically we're going, after this weekend, we're going down the path of hitting July, Independence Day. We have a lot of potential false flags coming up. And just to understand this is, I do not have a crystal ball in front of me. What I'm doing is I'm taking all this information and trying to understand what is going on and explain what is going on. And again, even though we have a list of all these potential false flags, and we're looking at the economic news, and we're looking at war, we don't have a timeline. We don't know exactly which false flag they're going to use. There are probably some false flag drills and things like that that we don't even know about. But we do know that something is going to happen because they need to get certain things completed before the collapse. And yesterday I went over Naomi Wolf's 10 things that a closed society does. And it's funny, since I've read that and listened to the video, and I put that page on the X22 Report site. If you scroll all the way down on the home page on the right-hand side and go to articles, it's under, I think it's under rights, I put it. And you can see everything written out there that she talked about. And if you go to yesterday's episode, which was episode number 95, all the way at the bottom of that page, I also put it. But now, since I've been looking at that, and every time I see something happening in the news, it completely fits in what they're doing. And it's funny because now I'm like, holy crap, that's point number 8, that's point number 4. And you can see that our whole entire way of life is going to change dramatically. And I know we're all talking about the collapse, but there are many other things that go along with the collapse that I don't think people talk about it here and there. But when we put all this together, this is really scary. Yes, people are going to lose their wealth. People are going to have their money frozen in their banks. But the amount of rights that we will lose because of what is happening is incredible, and the destruction of the Constitution and all of the rights listed in the Bill of Rights are being removed one by one, and before you know it, everyone's going to wake up. And this is the scary part, where people, when you're on these lists, show up at your door, and you look out your window and there's 20 military, dressed up soldiers, which are probably either DHS or Blackwater. And it's funny because when people talk about foreign troops in America, I'm thinking to myself, Blackwater, they hire foreign troops from all over the world. And this is how I'm thinking of it. We have DHS and we have Blackwater, and I think Blackwater is working with DHS. And can you imagine them showing up at your doorstep and just taking you away? And your family sitting there going, what the hell? And this is the scary part. Yeah, you can have your gold and your silver to protect yourself, but if you're on one of these lists, because you have to remember, we are now under, if you like to admit it or not, we are under a surveillance state. Everything you do, everything that is done, is being watched. There is only one reason they do this, and I'm talking about the government, is to keep track of who's who, what groups they belong to, are they a threat, and this is what's very upsetting and scary. But we'll go through this and we'll get into everything, and this is why I'm saying we have really turned the corner, and we are heading down a very dark path, and it just, the light at the end of the tunnel, I hope we all wake up in time, and we rise up to stop this. And I know a lot of people, like, they say that you can't, but you have to remember, if you look at other countries, and I know, like, oh, they'll just swoop by with an airplane and just drop bombs on everyone. You have to remember, in other countries, most of the other countries don't have weapons, but they are able to make a difference, because you have to remember, there's 350 million people. The armed forces and stuff, when a true revolution happens, even the army, the military, realizes what's happening. Now, Blackwater and the other brainwashed agencies that they set up might be fighting, but you have to remember, a lot of these people in the military and their families who are saying this is wrong, they're not going to swoop down and drop bombs on people, because it could be their families, it could be their cousins, it could be someone they know. So we have to think of this for a while, because they're loyal to the country, of what the country stands for. And this is what I like to believe, that this is what would happen, because when you look in other countries that don't have weapons, and that we have a true revolution, and people rise up, people join together. But we'll get into that in a little later, because there are certain things that are happening in other countries that don't make sense. But let's get into the economic collapse news, and let's see what's going on here. Now, the available gold supply is disappearing as gold prices plunges. Now that, to me, is common sense. Of course it's all disappearing. The prices are purposely being slammed down, so banks, central bankers, countries, certain people can purchase the physical at reduced prices. And we have to think of it this way. The Fed is creating different bubbles: the stock market bubble, the treasury bond bubble, the student loan bubble. And they want to include gold into this bubble, because I heard a lot of people talking about that gold and silver, precious metals, are in a bubble. So can you imagine if they didn't slam down gold and silver and the other precious metals right now? While the stock market is dropping, while tapering, they're talking about tapering and all this other bullshit they're talking about, and gold was rising at this point. What do you think people would do? As people would start taking their money and putting it into gold and silver and buying all the physical they possibly could. So the Fed and the central bankers can't have that happen. So what they need to do is push it down and make people believe it's not good to get into. It's almost like in the Great Depression, when everyone had to turn in their gold, and they paid everyone $20 an ounce. And as soon as they had all the gold went from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce. And we also saw this happen in 2008, right before the crash. Gold went down, and afterwards it went back up, because they need to keep the illusion going. The stock market is the place to be. During 2008, the stock market and the real estate market, and I should say now too also, and is the place to be. And people were buying homes at the height of the market and not even looking at gold and silver. Can you imagine, instead of buying that house, which the news was out pushing, the Fed was out pushing, Goldman Sachs was pushing but betting against it. Can you imagine if you took your money, all of that money that you spent on that home, and put it into gold and silver? This is what's happening right now. All right, let's move on here. And let's see. A former Reagan White House budget director. This isn't going to end well. The Fed has painted itself into a corner. Again, I've said this before also. The Fed, if they stop printing money, propping up the stock market by buying the toxic assets from the banks, and the banks putting the money back into the stock market, if they stop that now or they continue printing, it makes no difference. We're screwed either way. If they stop right now, the collapse happens right now. If they continue printing, the government has a chance to do what they need to do to get this closed system completely closed down, locked down, and ready for the collapse. And that's what they're doing. But David Stockman, thinks and believes the Fed has created a massive bubble, which we all know. He sounds off on the Fed and the huge financial challenges we face in the months and years ahead. American economy faces a long twilight of no growth, rising taxes, and brutally intensifying physical conflict. And we know this for a fact. And basically what's happening is most of the people are getting out of the market. The smart money heading for the exits. Goldman, Cramer, and the Fed governors are saying, obviously they're trying to prop up the markets before July 4th, trying to inflate it so they can sell into it. After the 4th could be a major correction, especially since earning reports come out in full force then. And I just can't even imagine what these earning reports are going to be, because I just can't believe that they're going to be good. But then again, people make up fake things. Now, this is very disturbing. Congress is going to double the student loan interest. Now, you have to remember, the youth population of people coming out of college, the unemployment rate is around 50 or 55% or so. And the Senate adjourned for July 4th recess on Thursday, but failed to keep interest rates on Stafford loans at the current 3.4% rate. The federally subsidized loans are set to expire on July 1st, after which they will rise to 6.8%. Now, just think about this for a second. All of those students who are underemployed, do not have employment, trying to make payments on their student loan, what is going to happen? Now, let's take, for instance, they have a standard student loan of, $23,000, and it's paid over 10 years, and they're let's just say they're paying, $2,600 a month for this. The student would be paying $3,000 instead, with the change of interest. And this is going to have a dramatic effect. We're going to see a lot of defaults of student loans. And you know what happens when you default on a student loan. You basically can't do anything. And this student, and people talking about the student loan bubble, this could bring down the entire system of the student loan, because there's going to be defaults all over the place because all these youths do not have work or they're underemployed. They're coming out of school, but there are no jobs. Now, let's move on here. The Fed is now taking over the entire Treasury market, and basically the article goes on to say, basically the Fed is screw tapering. They're not tapering anything. You saw from the news, people were selling off their bonds, and someone had to buy these bonds. And guess who it was? It was the Fed. Yesterday, the Fed released its latest balance sheet data at $3.478 trillion. The Fed assets reached a new all-time high, of course, up $8 billion from the prior week and up $615 billion from last year at this point. So they are the ones, they are the market, they are the stock market. They are everything. There is no free market anymore. They are it. They're the ones who are handling it, and they know for a fact it will be impossible to taper. Actually, they're going to have to print more money and print and print and print. And when I say print, I mean push a button and it's electronically done. And basically, this is what we're seeing. And this just shows again how the economy is not working. Okay, let's move on here. Now, U.S. sanctions North Korea's bank as it targets weapons program. Basically, North Korea is purchasing oil from Iran, which doesn't use the U.S. dollar or the petrodollar. And the U.S. government is trying everything they can to stop this from happening. And they're trying to put the squeeze on North Korea to have them purchase oil from another country that deals with the reserve currency. So this is their next tactic, and this is what they're trying to do right now. The Obama administration said on Thursday it was sanctioning North Korea's Daedong Credit Bank for its role in supporting Pyongyang's weapons of mass destruction. Now, you have to remember, do you really believe what the government says? Weapons of mass destruction. Where have we heard this before? We've heard this about Saddam Hussein, that he had weapons of mass destruction, which they never found because he never had it. That whole entire invasion was to take Iraq and put the central bank into Iraq and put the entire country back on the petrodollar. That's all that was, and secure the oil fields. This had nothing to do with anything about weapons or anything like that. Let's use common sense. I mean, all of this rhetoric and all of this that goes on only has to do with those countries that are not using the petrodollar, that do not have the central bank in the country. Just look around at all the countries that we have invaded. Look around at the countries that we're in now, or the countries that we are sanctioning right now. Those are the countries that either are not trading using the reserve currency, and those are the countries that do not have a central bank. And that's it. That's all it is. Okay, let's move on here. Now, I put on these Sentinel alerts, and listen, just before I go further, someone wrote me an email, and I put on the Sentinel alerts about the constitutional rights, about people having their guns seized in a home during a flood, and I read the article, and I was doing it quickly, and I didn't realize it was in Canada, and someone emailed saying it was in Canada. We don't have the same laws. But again, they can't, and I want you to correct me if you think I'm wrong. I mean, these are great checks and balances. You guys, I mean, I'm getting emails all day long. People email me and they tell me different things, and they, tell me if I'm, like, oh, I might have said something wrong, or I didn't say something right. But I don't have a problem with that because we're here for each other. I'm just a mouthpiece going through this and trying to make sense of everything and to wake everyone up before it's too late. That's it. And basically, no, that's pretty much it. But let me move on here. Horrific video of beheading raises questions of arms supply to Syrian rebels. Now, when I looked at this video, let's just think back, and we have to use what we know. A true people who are revolting against their government don't go around hurting their people. Let's just go back in time. Can you imagine Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington? Now, they were fighting for the freedom of their people against the King of England. Do you think it makes sense for Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington, and all the others to go around and beheading and killing the people? Does that prove anything? No. It makes no sense. Why would the people then want to follow these leaders? It makes no sense. And the reason why it makes no sense is because the people in Syria are not Syrians. They are hired mercenary soldiers to create an uprising, hired by the U.S. government agencies. They've done this in Egypt. They've done this in Libya. They've done this in Lebanon. They've done this in Iraq. Except we went into Iraq, but we completely went in there and switched it over. And they're doing this in Syria. And this is how you know that this is not a real revolution. Now, in Egypt, okay, there is a central bank. They trade their oil in using the petrodollar, and basically, the people are rising up, and they are basically rallying against the government. Now, the United States government is supplying Egypt with security forces and will use this to bring in weapons and other assets, because they already have it in Jordan when they did the Jordan drill. And this will be used to secure and make sure that the people do not overthrow what they've set up already. And plus, they will have the weapons in Egypt for the eventual war, which will take place to cover up the entire economic collapse. This is basically what I think is going on there, because every time, you have to think of it this way. When we go into a country and we're saying there's a revolution and they overthrow the government, the hired mercenaries, and we put in our puppet regime, and we put a central bank, and we put everything back on the petrodollar, then the people start realizing what the hell just happened, that this is not the government they wanted, and they rise up again. It's very difficult for the U.S. government to say there's another revolution going on, because they just had one. So when you see people rising up like in Egypt, like in Libya, and like in Lebanon, again, these are the real people. And basically, we send troops and security advisors and all these people in there to control the situation. But we're not going to get involved, but in the end we will get involved. But this is what happens every single time. Just go back and look, and you can see it. It's so obvious. Okay, let's move on here. Now, we've talked about that we're under a complete surveillance state. This is point number 8 with Naomi Wolf, creating going from an open society to a closed society, and basically the FBI documents deleted plots to kill Occupy leaders if deemed necessary, and they got hold of these documents, and there are parts in here which basically it says and identified, and this was deleted, as of October, planned to engage in a sniper attack against protesters in Houston, Texas, if deemed necessary. And identified, deleted, have received intelligence that indicated the protesters in New York and Seattle planned similar protests in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin, Texas. And basically, they were eyeing the Occupy Wall Street movement. If they had to, they were going to take them out or stop them. We saw videos of the police pushing, hitting people for absolutely no reason. And in the United States, according to the Constitution, we have every right to protest or, talk against the government, the banks, or whatever we deem necessary. Our founding fathers gave us that right. But in a closed society, these rights are being taken away. Okay, let's move on. The House passes the 2014 version of the NDAA, and the NSA surveillance will lead to indefinite detention. So basically, they're repassing the NDAA. They have put some amendments in there, but the same thing is still happening, where they can just come, get you, put you away, basically violating your rights, your Fourth Amendment, your First Amendment, and just basically taking you away and not having a trial, not telling you what your crime is. And we've seen this in countries other than here, and we are starting to head down this dark, dark path. And we can see this happening. And when I saw this story, I was amazed that the U.S. Army restricts access to Guardian website over secrets in NSA leak stories. And basically, what the U.S. Army confirmed on Thursday, that access to the Guardian newspaper's website has been filtered and restricted for its personnel. The policy is due to classified documents described in detail in the stories. So basically what they're doing is they're censoring the newspaper and deciding what they can filter and what people can see. And this goes back to point number 8 in controlling the press. Now, the press was, the reason why all the Bill of Rights of freedom of speech, the freedom of press, was to keep check and balances with the government. The newspapers, the media, was supposed to call the government out on if they were doing something wrong and do investigative reporting to find out the truth. But since the main media is controlled by the government and the powers, the central bankers, the elite, the Illuminati, the New World Order, whatever you want to call them, they control the flow of information, and they're continually, and they're locking down on the flow of information. And that's why we see senators coming out saying we need to license journalists, we need to get rid of the internet, and those type of things. And talking about the internet, there was an article saying that the internet influenced the Boston bombing suspect. And you can see here they are going after the internet, saying the internet is bad, and this is they're pushing and trying to make people think that the internet is not a good thing. It will help the terrorists. And I know everyone's thinking like, what are you talking about? You have to think of it this way. Before 9/11, would you let anyone pat you down in an airport, take you to a special room, put you on a list, or do any of the things they're doing now. After 9/11, they scared everyone with many different tactics. Red alert, orange alert, terrorists, 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 and got people scared. Now the internet is becoming that place where terrorists go. And they're building the case of why they need to control the internet. And this goes back to controlling the flow of information. That's all it is. That's what they're doing. And you can tell how they're framing all of this, everything that they're doing. Now, Shannon Richardson was arrested for sending those ricin letters to Obama. And she's an actress. She's been on Vampire Diaries. And basically, I think she also sent one allegedly to Bloomberg also. But what I find interesting is the story is that she sent these letters to try to frame her husband in a, basically what it says here. She tried to, in an attempt to frame her estranged husband, using these letters and sending it to the president and Mayor Bloomberg. And what the letters said is this, and this is what it says. In the ricin letter addressed to President Obama, mailed May 20th, Richardson allegedly wrote, You will have to kill me and my family before you get my guns. Anyone wants to come to my house will get shot in the face. Now, this is starting to seem a little ridiculous, because it's amazing, and this happened during the voting on the gun bill, during the Boston bombing, while the gun bill was in the Senate. Bloomberg is going after the guns, and it just seems to fit way too perfectly into this whole entire thing. And I'm telling you, they are painting gun owners as crazy people. And the Boston bombing, and what I found very interesting about I'm just going to go back to the Boston bombing for a sec, that during the Boston bombing, before this happened, there was a scheduled Operation Urban Shield, and it was meant to train dozens of detectives in the greater Boston area to work together to thwart a terrorist threat. The hypothetical terrorist group was even given a name. And I thought this was very interesting, and this is what made me think of it with her and the whole Boston bombing thing. The name was given Free America Citizens, a homegrown cadre of militiamen whose logo would be a metal skull wearing an Uncle Sam hat. Now, I said this in my previous episodes. I do believe the Boston bombing was really set up to go after gun owners, because they were making the case with the black powder and how gun owners have access to gunpowder and they can use this and paint them as a crazy person. And these ricin letters were sent off, and what she said in these letters, allegedly, that, I'm a gun-loving person and I'm going to shoot you in my face if you come and you're not taking my guns. The whole thing was being set up in that way. And basically, everything started to fall apart. People were taking too many pictures, and they had a distraction down in Texas. And I know I'm repeating myself, but this just is all fitting into me of what was really going on, and their state of mind, because the gun bill was being voted on, and they really, really, really wanted that passed. And that's what I think was going on. Now, let's move on here. Now, we talked about that that we are in a total surveillance state, and more information is coming out that JW obtains records detailing Obama administration warrantless collection of citizens' personal financial data. Basically, knowing how much you have in the bank, knowing where you go to shop, knowing where you are every minute of the day. Because you have to remember, most people do not use cash. They slide their debit card or they slide their credit card. Or for those people who are paying by their cell phones now, pay by their cell phone. So they are tracking everybody all around, putting people on lists, knowing where you are every minute of the day. Basically, our constitutional rights are being ripped, shredded, and torn apart where nobody has any privacy anymore. And I read someplace that the Nazi Germany, I think it was maybe it was in Russia, maybe it was the KGB in Russia, that this whole system that we have here, they would have loved to spy on their people. And I believe it was Russian, the KGB. And basically during Nazi Germany, they did the same thing. There was a surveillance state, and they were spying on their people and putting them into groups, and that's why they were able to move in so quickly when the time came. Same thing is happening here today. All right, let's move on here. Now, I know I talk about cyber attacks a lot, and the cyber attack that was scheduled for June 28th, which is today, has been conveniently changed to July 18th. And why did this happen? Don't know. Seems a little suspicious to me, but they decided to change it. And now it is July 18th, which is now a Thursday, that they're going to use the Quantum Dawn 2. So we'll be watching out for this potential false flag. And what I find very interesting is that all the news agencies, Reuters, Bloomberg, all reported the June 28th date, and I can barely find any reporting the switch to July 18th except for one that I have linked on my page. And actually, if you go to SIFMA, which I also have linked here, they report it's on July 18th also. I find it very odd, very suspicious that this was done, but we'll have to follow it. Now, the DHS National Risk Assessment estimate on GPS disruption, still a lot of unknowns. Basically, what they're saying is that the GPS can disrupt the critical infrastructure. And for some reason, the DHS is continually harping on the infrastructure in the United States. Power grid, electrical, nuclear. And now they're bringing up GPS disruptions and jamming could potentially harm critical infrastructure sectors in the United States. And they keep making this case over and over. And it's basically here to convince people that we are going to be attacked one way or another, and the power in the United States water system, our key infrastructure systems, will go down for the main event. Because if all else fails, they need to get everything working like they want it to be worked. Basically what I mean is martial law, gun confiscation, siphoning off money from banks, going to war, and blaming this whole entire mess on another country. Meanwhile, the U.S. and other countries will be locked down. The people inside the countries will not be able to do anything, and all they'll have us do is fight their war. Okay, let's move on here. Now, there was a interesting article that the U.S. uses cyber attacks around the globe. Basically, we know this is happening, especially from General Alexander. He came out and said that we've used this against Iran's nuclear facility. Who also explained, how they've been doing this, and now This political commentator, Kamal Wazni, came out and said, well, obviously the United States launch every attack that can be against the Islamic Republic, whether it's for military implication or for media implication or for all kind of attacks that come or can be able to launch against the Iranian Republic. The United States is doing it. We know they attacked the nuclear, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they attacked Syria when they had an internet outage. And basically, the U.S. government is attacking all different countries because right now they can't be stopped and nothing can be done. They have free reign. But they said if someone retaliates against the government here, it's an act of war. Just remember that. And basically, he went on to say, well, obviously, you hit the point because this is what the latest discussion that took place between the President of the United States and the President of China, because there is a mutual accusation between the United States and China by using this cyber war attack, and this is probably going to be the war to come. I think the United States is using it heavily around the globe, attacking everybody who the United States thinks they are enemies, and they are using it as they use the drone war attacking people on the ground. Everyone, every country that does not have a central bank, who is not trading using the petrodollar, is an enemy of the central bankers and the government, and they will use cyber attacks on those countries. Okay, let's move on here. Now, I saw this and I started to think to myself, America will see its worst race riot yet this summer. Now, this could be a potential false flag because you have to think back to Rodney King, what happened. Zimmerman is on trial right now for shooting a young man who was African American, and if George Zimmerman gets off and is not convicted, we could see race riots in cities. And to help this along, government can plant people in other cities to create people rioting in the street. And this, by this very nature, the president can call for a state of emergency and martial law. So I put this on the right-hand side of the website, which I call the sidebar, in the potential false flags. And if we see any type of verdict during this summer, we will have to see what happens. But this is just another potential false flag. Okay, now I'm just going to read some things from Jeff Foxworthy. You might have seen this already. A country founded by geniuses but run by idiots. And I thought this was very telling. If you can get arrested for hunting or fishing without a license, but not for entering and remaining in the country illegally, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots. If you have to get your parents' permission to go on a field trip or take an aspirin in school, but not to get an abortion, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots. If you must show your identification to board an airplane, cash a check, buy liquor, or check out a library book and rent a video, but not to vote for who runs the government, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but run by idiots. If the government wants to prevent stable, law-abiding citizens from owning gun magazines that hold more than 10 rounds, but gives 20 F-16 fighter jets to the crazy new leaders in Egypt, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots. If, in the nation's largest city, you can buy 2 16-ounce sodas, but not one 24-ounce soda, because 24 ounces of sugary drink might make you fat, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but run by idiots. If an 80-year-old woman or a 3-year-old girl who's confined to a wheelchair can be strip-searched by the TSA at the airport, but a woman in a burqa or I'm going to pronounce this, hijab, is only subject to having her neck and head searched, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots. If your government believes the best way to eradicate trillions of dollars of debt is to spend trillions more, you might live in a nation that is founded by geniuses but is run by idiots. If a 7-year-old boy can be thrown out of school for saying his teacher is cute, but hosting a sexual exploration or a diversity class in grade school is perfectly acceptable, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots. If hard work and success are met with higher taxes and more government regulation and intrusion, while not working is rewarded with food stamps, WIC checks, Medicaid benefits, subsidized housing, and free cell phones, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but run by idiots. If the government planned for getting people back to work is provide incentives for not working by granting 99 weeks of unemployment checks without any requirement to prove that gainful employment was diligently sought but couldn't be found, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots. If you pay your mortgage faithfully, denying yourself the newest big screen TV while your neighbor buys iPhones, timeshares, and wall size, do-it-all plasma screen TV and new cars, and the government forgives his debt when he defaults on his mortgage, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots. If being stripped of your constitutional right to defend yourself makes you more safe according to the government, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots. What a country. How about we give God a reason to continue blessing America? Listen, everyone, I want to thank everyone for listening. Have a great weekend. There will be a report tomorrow. It's my news brief that I do on Saturday. Everyone, be safe, be well, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.